Okay. Real-time working group, 3rd of June already. Yeah, I have the first item, so I'll kick off. Just in announcements, we spoke before about reference architectures and the possibility of using those to get some idea about resource usage. I added that as a step to the exit criteria, like we can look further down the agenda about whether we even want to continue along this direction. But Grant actually made some progress already and ran a separate 10K reference architecture with action cable switched on. Noticed a 12% roughly increase in memory, which is more or less expected. So that's because we're running like 2 extra Puma workers. But he did mention that testing the feature itself would be somewhat problematic in that we would need to like if we wanted to say put a unknown number of WebSocket connections in, we would need some new testing apparatus. So interesting discussion there. You can read it. Whether we want to keep that as the reference architecture as part of the exit criteria, I don't know. Like possibly when we address like further down the agenda, like whether we still want to go with Kubernetes first, even we can talk about it then. Matthias, you have the next item.
Yeah, that's a good segue actually. So because I mean, the memory team hasn't been very involved in the last month or so, and yeah, the main reason is there was no action cable work really scheduled for 13.1, and yeah, we're like, so we're going through the next planning phase right now, and so the topic came up again for 13.2. I think we had like a bit of like a directional struggle internally whether our focus should currently be on the performance of .com or whether it should be more on the self-managed bits as well. And so I'm bringing up the topic again for 13.2. So it's a bit of a non-update, unfortunately, but like we're doing this right now. So I hope I'll get more clarity behind this soon, because there are definitely a couple of things we identified that where we could reap some like decent memory gains. So yeah, like I hope we'll actually get to working on that pretty soon. But I'll keep you posted on that. Otherwise, nothing else from my part.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so the next item is mine. I had a discussion with Christopher Leffelholz, who's the executive sponsor, I think, for the working group. I think that's the term. We are past our original due date, although like that was set with practically no knowledge of how we would proceed. So I think that's okay. We should look at setting a new one. So I asked Maren to estimate sort of when the delivery team might get around to prioritizing some of this work. He mentioned a couple of blockers. You can check them out in the thread there on the epic or in the issue. And it looks like probably 13.3 is when they'll first get a chance to look at this specific deploying with Puma with Action Cable. So that puts us in August. So I wanted to see what people thought about Henrik's proposal earlier in the week that we potentially go down the route of embedded Action Cable. I don't know if anyone's read the discussion on that issue. There's quite a bit back and forth. Henrik, do you have any context on that?
Yeah, so I was also thinking that we could actually run embedded and, actually even run on the same web nodes just for staging maybe, and we won't need any infra changes, and we could like see the feature in staging because we wanted to test some things, with the feature actually working, right? But I think it was Camille who expressed some concerns regarding running embedded mode because there are some unknowns, like because they're running on the same process, there might be like GPL contention and all that. But yeah, it was also agreed that we can't really tell without data. So I guess it makes sense to continue working on like allowing embedded mode so that we can actually get data, right? I mean, it's a good reason for us to say we need to run embedded mode, at least on staging maybe, or even on .com for a certain group of, projects or, very minimal set of projects, just so we get some sort of data to decide on whether embedded is, worth it, or is this something we exposed to our self-managed customers, even if we don't do this in the future.
Quick question. But your proposal was a bit more nuanced even than this, right? Because it's a bit confusing because I think also the discussion, that's why the discussion went back and forth a bit, because we have embedded mode, which is really running Action Cable alongside and as part of the ordinary web server that would also handle like normal requests. But then there was this idea of splitting the traffic so that it wouldn't actually simultaneously handle both web requests and Action Cable requests. So I thought that was a super interesting idea. So I'm just wondering if this is something we still would want to like try and do.
Yeah, I was thinking that I proposed that because, you know, just to, you know, make this setup like more similar for like if you're on, you know, a single node versus multiple nodes. But it's related to the next item on the agenda. Like Myron mentioned that it's a non-starter for staging to have a different, you know, configuration or different setup. So if we are going to have like separate nodes running in embedded mode that's split via HA proxy, which are only handling, you know, WebSocket connections. I mean, we could test the idea, right? But yeah, Myron mentioned that it's going to be a lot of duplicate effort and probably not worth doing. So my next idea was, you know, why not just run embedded mode like right on the web servers themselves so that we don't have to do any infra changes.
Okay, thank you.
It gets us to a feature we can demo on a non-production environment, which is like valuable in and of itself. But would you see that going to production as a first iteration? Say the resource usage was sort of nominal.
Yeah, and probably we
could
can't
prove
really
that there
tell,
was a
right,
benefit.
because of the traffic. So I don't know. Would like ops people be comfortable with doing that? Or?
I mean, it sounds like he's not here, so I don't want to like speak on behalf of Camille, but like it sounded from like the comments he left that he was not a big fan of the idea just because of the knock-on effects it might have. It's impossible to scale it independently of ordinary web traffic. So I think there's like a couple, he made a good list of concerns, which are good concerns, you know, good points. Why this might maybe be not a great idea to do that in production. On the other hand, I kind of agree with you as well that we need to kind of get something out to kind of, you know, get our feet wet and like test something and put some like substance behind it in terms of numbers, you know, like what we can handle. Because otherwise it just remains all speculation. It's really hard to test this in like a local setup. There was also the option of doing, and I don't know if that's also been dismissed now, but like I always kept thinking, why can't we offer the simplified approach to those customers that we know run very simplified deployments, right? Which would be those that run, let's say, like a single node deployment or something like this. I'm sure that, I'm fairly confident that this would probably be much less impactful if we would run embedded. Well, it would be very impactful in terms of memory savings, but it would probably not have a lot of impact on the system performance if we do this for just single node deployments, but for .com still have dedicated nodes. So I'm just wondering if that is still a problem or not. And because the other concern there was, it does again introduce a configuration switch. So where we would, yes, do things slightly differently based on your particular setup, but I have a really hard time. I think we will have to have this split at somewhere, you know, otherwise we won't be, there's no such thing as like a single configuration that will work for everyone.
Yeah, I think we're going to that direction because like mentioned like just before was that to let us actually try this embedded mode, we'd have to add that switch anyway. So we're gonna do that MR. That's not gonna be too hard, but I think then we'll ask the question whether to deploy this publicly or, you know, announce that there's this switch, you know, in our docs, or, you know, make this a real option. But initially we're gonna have to do that anyway to test and get some data, right? I think the main problem here is that if we're proposing this option to self-managed customers on single nodes, we must have some sort of like confidence or tests let this work. Or like we don't run it on .com, we don't run it on anywhere. So like how do we? I guess we could run it on dev, right? Or their single node, I guess. Dev and ops. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the switch is necessary, and it's just the way things get run is you have some use cases for the embedded and the single node, like Matthias said, and then you have .com, which has a completely different set of parameters.
Yeah, and in a way, it's quite similar to what we do with self-monitoring and the embedded Prometheus server as well, right? I mean, you also have the option of running it, embedded like for a single node setup, or put it on a dedicated node. So it's not like this would be something outrageously different compared to what we've been doing before with other components.
As long as the normal executing code is the same, I don't see a big difference. It's just, are you running it in a dedicated mode? Like right now, we already don't even do dedicated for some of our use case for even the Rails app. We have dedicated web, we have dedicated API, and we have dedicated Git. And so it's the same code base, it's just running in isolation. And we actually want to do more of that, where we're gonna use traffic routing ahead of the Rails app to send merge. There's a proposal to send merge request related calls to a dedicated merge request set of Rails apps. And like this kind of separation is stuff that you do at scale, but doesn't matter for single node deployment.
Yeah, the other thing related to the previous discussion, whether where we want to split this, is that the question is whether we want to do it at the load balancer level, like we do with the web API and right now, because that way they're actually running the exact same thing. Their requests are just routed differently. But when we were talking about Action Cable embedded mode, the switch for embedded mode, it's actually slightly different. It's not like the same code path because we're running a different rack application. I mean, like I said, we could also run the exact same rack application that handles web requests and then just split it at the proxy level, so it doesn't receive any other web requests. Would that be like safer?
That would work great. That seems reasonably feasible.
Just a question on that. So what's the difference between running the entire application and only serving WebSocket traffic to the nodes? So do you get what I mean? Like running, in other words, like all nodes run Action Cable, but we only send some traffic to some nodes, versus what we were doing up until now, which is to have a separate server for Action Cable.
There are slight differences, like because I think you saw it when you were creating the Docker images, right? That we had to specify a different rackup file for the Puma server. So the Puma server runs that rackup file and goes directly to the Action Cable.server rack application. So it kind of skips a lot of things, like the rack middleware, Rails router. I mean, it's very minimal because if it's an Action Cable request, it should just like go through all those and but it's still a difference. So I was just thinking to be safer, to just load the whole app. I mean, in terms of memory, they're negligible anyway, right? They're still loading our whole GitLab app, and the memory consumption is still the same. And yeah, I noticed this when I was adding the logging infrastructure for Action Cable, and I noticed that with the way we're doing right now with a separate Puma server, we actually don't have. I noticed that we weren't generating request IDs because the request ID middleware wasn't there because it was going directly to the Action Cable rack app, and I had to add that middleware in the rack file. And so, yeah, we wouldn't have to do those things if we just ran the whole web app these servers.
So I think like with regards to the first of the exit criteria, which was to ship a feature to self-hosted customers, there's a dependency on our deployment to .com in that we can't honestly say we've done that until we can lift the feature flag, right? So even though like technically anybody who has, I guess, a version of GitLab from, I think it's 12.10 can actually run this feature completely on their own instances. We can't consider it shipped. And as far as I see, like that doesn't really change if we do this. So I guess I'm wondering, like we mentioned there, talking about customers that run, say, one node and shipping it to them, but we would still have the problem where we have to like put in the docs, that they have to lift the feature flags and so on. So they're actually in that position already. It's just, it's not single node customers, but sort of intermediate sized and plus customers who are run on multiple nodes. Would that be correct?
Yeah, but still we don't have like the confidence or experience to say we've run it on single nodes to allow us to like ship it to them. Ben, would you know if like is it fine if we like experimented on like dev.gitlab.org or ops maybe instance, or are there a single node?
Yeah, dev is something we could experiment with.
Yeah, so maybe after we do the embedded mode switch, we could like try it on dev maybe.
Okay, so like then we're actually committing to support both into the future. Is this right?
I mean, we're just testing it for now, and we'll see. Like, I don't know how we can make the call of whether like, yeah, this is good enough, we're gonna support this, or like,
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, that sounds good. So from the point of view of the agenda item I added, like I'm wondering when to push out when to set the next due date for the working group, right? Like when are we realistically going to have something to ship to customers? I don't want it to be like we have this dependency on the delivery team, and we can like continue to pull tasks like the Helm charts and try to help unblock where we can the delivery team. But like this seems like something we could press on with, especially if we can use dev.gitlab to actually test it out. So I'm wondering if we want to add some. Sorry.
While we wait for the Kubernetes work, then I guess we kind of like shift our focus to testing single node instances.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Any opposing opinions on that?
No, I just had a related question, I guess, because we do have, and I don't know, I'm playing a bit devil's advocate here, like that we do have a couple of features that we do not actually dog food on .com, right? Things like, what was it? I keep thinking of Zipkin, but it's not, what is the distributed tracer that we ship? What's the name again?
Jaeger.
Oh, sorry, yes, Jaeger. And like, this is not something we use on .com, right? And we have, what was it? I was just looking at something again where I was thinking there was like a feature specifically for on-prem customers. So I'm just wondering, like, are there cases we had in the past that we could look at for how we could test something that we kind of know will not roll out to .com in its current shape or form, but that will give us some confidence? Because I have no idea. Has that happened in the past before on dev.gitlab, or is that like a kind of a new thing we're trying out now?
Definitely new.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, no, like it was just a question. Just a thought.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know who has context on those, but yeah, we could ask maybe like how they got enough confidence to ship it to users without using it on GitLab.com.
Okay, cool. Heinrich, what are the next steps to actually implement that switch then? What's your estimation of like how long it would take, how complex it is?
Shouldn't be that complex. I mean, max next week, maybe.
It's already done.
It's just, yeah, it's just some configuration options, maybe, yeah, extra switches to Omnibus. And
All right, cool. Gabe, are you okay with that being scheduled then?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the themes, so whatever we need to do, totally supportive.
Okay, cool. We've nothing else on the agenda as far as I can see. Does anyone have anything they want to add before we wrap up? Cool. All right. Thanks for your time. Maybe the next meeting, Heinrich, if you have that, or if you have the issue for it, like, add it to the agenda and we can follow it.
yeah, we have an existing issue for it, and yeah, we'll use that.
Awesome. All right. Thanks. All right. See you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks.